Lord of the Mysteries. Chapter 511. Snitch Halo. Whoosh! A strong gale blew out from Bishop Millet's body, lifting up his dark blue bishop robes. Crack! 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 The branches of the nearby trees snapped as they flew into the air. Donna's body involuntarily rose a few meters into the air before being thrown out several meters. Her body ached all over when she fell to the ground. It wasn't just her. Cecile, Denton, Timothy, Harris, and the others were all blown up by the wind and landed in different spots. Only Cleves, Teague, and Erdy, either because of their training or abnormally heavy weight, staggered to the ground and tumbled a few times. Eland, who was facing Bishop Millet directly, did a series of retreating and backward somersaulting actions, dodging the incoming blow from the wind. Klein and Danitz didn't attempt to resist it head-on. Instead, they flew backward like kites. Although they looked like they were about to collapse to the ground, they ultimately managed to keep their balance. As soon as the hurricane stopped, 6 figures emerged from the dispersing fog. They were all wearing black cloaks and were headless. Left with only bleeding necks, their hoods were supported up by the eddies of the hurricane. Gasp! Gasp! Their throats emitted the low grunts of a beast like the moment before they were ready to attack. So! A series of thin and sharp wind blades shot out, leaving a clear and deep rift where Klein was somersaulting. Tap! 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 From both sides of the lantern-wielding Bishop Millet, whose dark blue bishop robe had flared up slightly, 6 headless men rushed at Klein, Eland, and the others, stomping on the ground until it trembled. One headless monster is already hard enough to deal with, but now there are 6 of them. And there's even a bishop who's obviously corrupted. When Blazing Danitz saw this scene, he couldn't help but feel his scalp tingle. At this moment, a bronze beam streaked past his eyes and shot into the distance. Dang! 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 Azek's copper whistle dropped to the ground and bounced a few times. With a whoosh, the 6 headless men changed direction at the same time, rushing towards the location where Azek's copper whistle came to a stop, leaving Bishop Millet standing alone in his original spot. Klein seized the opportunity, lifted his left hand, tearing off the sun brooch inside his coat, and threw it to Captain Eland, who was closest to him. He shouted succinctly, "Inject your spirituality. 5 seconds. Holy water." After saying this, he ignored his silk top hat that had been blown away, and instead, he bent his body, dashing towards Bishop Millet in a zigzag manner. So. One after another, wind blades were shot out in close succession, all of them aimed at Klein. In a flash, the ground showed signs of being cut and slashed. Klein either somersaulted, lunging forward, or jumping up by supporting his body with his hands to avoid the first round of concentrated fire. The dark red light in Bishop Millet's eyes grew brighter as he raised his hands. So. At this moment, the wind blades inundated him like a machine gun. Klein only had enough time to dodge half of it before his body was torn apart, turning into thin and light shreds of paper that flew into the air. Klein appeared in another direction and continued to charge at Bishop Millet, trying to close the distance between them to an effective distance. After catching the sun brooch, Eland immediately felt the heat. He wished that he could take off his clothes and jump into freezing water. He thought for a moment about the words Gehrman Sparrow had left him before taking out a tin-colored alcohol flask from the inside of his clothes, unscrewed the lid, and poured out all of the Lanty-proof inside. The strong aroma of the wine rapidly spread in all directions. Blazing Danitz looked around, feeling certain of the situation. With a grimace, he genuflected and suddenly pressed both his palms onto the ground. 2 scarlet fire serpents appeared out of thin air, clinging to the ground as they spread towards Azek's copper whistle, and created 4 burning walls of fire. His original plan had been to throw a fireball at Bishop Millet and let Gehrman Sparrow use the flames to easily jump towards the bishop and launch an attack. However, after seeing that the area around the bishop was filled with freezing gales, he rationally gave up on the idea. He was prepared to first clean up the headless monsters to prevent them from disturbing Garmin's Sparrow's ability to use his true strength. Cleves, Cecile, Teague, and Harris had already stood up again and had drawn their guns. They surrounded Erdy, Donna, and Timothy in the middle, guarding them against any other monsters that might appear. Their experience taught them that, without any prior teamwork training, it was best not to interfere in a battle that was beyond that of ordinary humans. Tap! 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 The 6 headless men, oblivious to the burning flames, burst through the scarlet walls of fire and began to pounce onto Azek's copper whistle like ravenous dogs. This gave Elan time to inject his spirituality into the sun brooch with composure. After the holy water condensed, he dripped them into the alcohol flask. Seeing the headless people in a frenzied bunch, Danet's heart skipped a beat. He bent down halfway and, with a flushed face, condensed a scorching white flaming spear in his right palm. Taking a step forward, he twisted his waist and swung his arm, throwing out the flaming spear. It whistled as it hit a headless man and nailed it to the ground. A blazing white light soared, and the headless man's body was reduced to ashes. The remaining half of his body was also burning, continuously releasing blackish-green gases. Seeing that his attack had succeeded, Danitz was about to continue this attack method when he suddenly sensed a particular kind of crazy, terrifying hunger. At this moment, he felt as though he had arrived in front of a deep abyss, just one step short from falling in. He knew that Garmin Sparrow was no longer suppressing the crazy soul inside him. After using paper figurine substitutes 3 times, Klein finally entered a predetermined distance. The glove on his left palm suddenly exploded with a hunger that had been suppressed for a long time, and dark golden scales began sprouting from it as it squirmed. Klein's pupils faded away, as if they had turned vertical. Immediately after, his pupils reflected Bishop Millet's fluttering dark blue robes. Without a sound, the middle-aged man who was about to produce a large number of wind blades suddenly tilted his head backwards, and his body froze for a second. His eyes, which were glowing with a dark red light, lost their rationality as they were filled with a sense of madness. His skin became smooth and colorful, like the skin of some aquatic creatures. He let out a panting sound, as though it had come from the depths of the ocean, as slippery, disgusting tentacles suddenly drilled out from under his dark blue robe. Psychiatrist's frenzy. Klein originally only wanted to use this to interrupt the enemy's attack in order to create an opportunity for him later, but after going berserk, Bishop Millet immediately lost control. The moment the fallen or corrupted man lost his final shackles of reasoning, he immediately stepped into the abyss of losing control. Klein's pupils shrank as he saw the situation. He no longer hesitated, and he switched the soul he was driving. In the midst of his frenzy, the glove on his left palm became stained with a gold color. His expression became dignified as his gaze once again locked onto Bishop Millet. In an instant, his eyes lit up like 2 bolts of lightning. All of a sudden, Bishop Millet let out a blood-curdling screech. His palms and tentacles retracted as he covered his head. His psyche had been penetrated, causing him indescribable pain. Interrogator. Klein pushed himself up with his right hand, and his left hand lit up with a resplendent brilliance. Right on the heels of that, he leaned back and opened his arms as if to embrace the sun. A thick, pure, and blazing brilliance descended from the sky, landing on Bishop Millet, and enveloping him within it. The surroundings changed as though it was daytime. The strong gales came to an abrupt halt. Sequence 5 Priest of Light. Bishop Millet's body began to evaporate, first his skin, then his tentacles, and finally his flesh. By the time the brilliant pillar of light disappeared, he no longer looked human. Instead, he had turned into a monster made of bones and flesh. Whatever was left of his aura was rather weak. However, he wasn't dead. The vitality of a rampager was stronger than ever before. Klein's expression didn't change. He took a few steps forward and rushed to the battered body of Bishop Millet. He genuflected, leaned forward, and pressed his left palm against the flesh. He stopped using the power of the Priest of Light because he wanted to leave some food for creeping hunger. A small crack silently appeared in the palm region of the glove as 2 rows of illusory, white, and eerie teeth grew out from it as it madly devoured any flesh, bones, and spirituality. However, Bishop Millet continued struggling. He steadied his flesh and grew new tentacles, trying to entangle Klein and pull him into his embrace. Klein threw his cane, pulled out his revolver, and fired 5 shots in quick succession at the monster. Bang! 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 Bullets ranging from pale gold, brass, and silver color struck Bishop Millet, igniting patches of different colored flames. Bishop Millet let out a blood-curdling screech once more, one that came from his soul. He finally wasn't able to resist creeping hunger. Even his flesh and soul were transformed into a torrent that poured into the insatiable mouth. In just 2 or 3 seconds, all that was left on the ground were clothes, money, and specks of dark blue and green light blobs. This was the difference between devouring and grazing. Klein wanted the latter more, but there was no other food around. Meanwhile, Captain Eland had already created 2 rounds of holy water inside his alcohol flask. Danitz hurriedly shouted at him, "Throw it over!" Without hesitation, Eland threw the alcohol flask towards the headless men who were still vying for the copper whistle. Ahem. Danitz cleared his throat and stood up straight. He leisurely inserted his left palm into his pocket and pushed forward with his right hand, quickly forming many scarlet fire ravens around him. These half-illusionary fire ravens flapped their wings and flew out, following different trajectories of attack. At the same time, they collided with the alcohol flask, which happened to be right on top of the group of headless people. Rumble! The alcohol flask shattered as sun-holy water splattered everywhere. Sizzle! The remaining headless people were all drenched as they screamed and twitched in pain before falling to the ground. They melted away quickly into blood as Azek's copper whistle lay still in the middle of the purified area. It's resolved. Gehrman Sparrow is really strong. Even if he encounters Captain, he'll have the ability to resist her. It's a pity that I didn't get to see what beyond her powers he had used. Danitz turned his head to look at Klein, who was standing in front of the remains of Bishop Millet, and silently sighed. Then he saw Gehrman Sparrow glance at him coldly. Subconsciously, Danitz dejectedly ran out and picked up Azek's copper whistle. Donna rubbed her bruised arm and saw Uncle Sparrow in his long black coat walking back a few steps before stooping to pick up his half-top hat, silently dust it off, and put it back on.